Let's go ahead and get started. Please rise for the pledge to the U.S. and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you all very much. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. The purpose of the meeting today is to hold a budget workshop and discuss matters related to the 2017-2018 Nueces County budget, including the proposed tax rate and tax levy and the new 2017-2018 Nueces County Hospital District budget. Commissioners, let me sort of set the tone this morning. We need everybody just take a deep breath. We've had a number of challenges brought to the court last Friday with meetings with the appraisal district. Ronnie's on his way over here. We've had Kevin working over the weekend. We've had Dale working over the weekend. Steve working over the weekend. We're going to be presenting some information to us this morning that could possibly change a lot of our thinking on where we are on the proposed current tax rate. And I'm not going to do anything other than just ask all of us just to be patient this morning. Let's talk through all of this together. This is a workshop. We can't vote on anything today, but if some changes are proposed, we may have to redo. And Laura, I'm going to have some really good advice this morning. We may have to redo some of our scheduling for the next few days in order to meet all the truth in taxation limitations. So if you hear something you don't understand, ask a question, please, because there's still a lot of things I don't understand. But we do know with the devastation in Port Aransas that we probably are looking at a substantial reduction in appraised values next year, not this year, because January 1, it was January 1. So this morning, Steve, I'm going to ask Johnny Hipp to please start off with the hospital district, if you will, Johnny, and let's talk through that, please, and you all are welcome to come to the podium, please, and we thank you for being here.
Okay, now it's on. Apologize. Good morning. It's a good morning to be here. I know you all have a lot of business in front of you. Judge and Commissioners, I've put at your places a copy of the hospital district's budget, and I'd like for you just to turn to page 1. And what I'm going to do is just touch on some highlights of the budget. If you all have some detailed questions, certainly interrupt me, and we'll try to get those things answered. And we have given some consideration, Judge, too, and after you do the other part of your presentation this morning, then I can tell you where we stand on getting prepared to handle all that.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay. Members of the court, our budget uses the effective tax rate, and the tax rate is shown on page 14 of the budget book there. The tax rate, as you've seen, as we've kept the effective tax rate, are for several years now and will continue to do so in this budget. The tax revenues that are associated with our budget, and I'm going to kind of work from the revenues down. The tax revenues associated with our budget are reduced by about $500,000 to accommodate one of the refinery tax lawsuits still sitting out there, and those adjustments are made. We took $300,000 out of the budgeted number, out of the current number for our budget, and $200,000 out of the delinquent category for our tax revenue. Just overall, our taxes represent about 28% of the district's revenues. The other 71% are made up by revenues other than taxes. Our expenses exceed revenues by about $4.3 million, and that's because we're using a prior year carryover to cover the IGTs that are going to be due during that year. In our expenses, the IGTs represent about 92% of our budget.
Johnny, I'm sorry. I don't want to keep interrupting you, but we do have a new commissioner who's not had an opportunity to understand IGT and hospital budgets a little bit, and I think it would probably be good if you could back up and do a little bit of information for all of us, but particularly for John. This is his first time to hear IGT and
Very good point.
Bond and Christus and all that stuff.
Very good point, Judge. Since that line item makes up a bulk of our expenses,
Yeah, so
that's
please,
worthy
if you
of a
will.
little drill down. The IGTs, basically the IGT stands for intergovernmental transfers. In Texas, those transfers are used to draw down supplemental federal funds to help the healthcare providers in our community. In this case, in Nueces County, those IGTs draw down supplemental payments, and the mechanisms how that works is we transfer the IGTs to the state matches them with federal funds, and then through the Health and Human Services Commission, the money comes back down to the provider. I do want to underscore one thing is when the IGTs go up, the money does not come back to the hospital district. It goes straight to the provider. So it has both the IGT in it and the match amount that the federal government adds to it. The providers in Corpus Christi or Nueces County who benefit are a Spawn Health System, Driscoll Children's Hospital, and Corpus Christi Medical Center. So all three acute care hospital providers receive payments. Now, the only non-hospital provider that receives the benefit of the IGTs is the City County Health Department, and they also have programs under the waiver, and we use our funds to make IGTs on their behalf so they can benefit from those federal payments as well. There are, and Judge, pull me back if I'm getting too far ahead, but, okay. There. Yes, sir, that's correct. And
Since they're listed as a provider?
yes, sir, that's correct. And they fit in a category of programs that public health departments can participate in.
They're changing it over right now.
Okay, thank you.
Once that money, Commissioner, comes back, I think the city and county have a mechanism they use to kind of move the money back and forth since the health department is jointly operated by both the city and the county.
No, Judge, that just recently changed since the city is no longer doing the 1115. It's now coming straight to the county.
Okay, good. I stand corrected, Commissioner. Okay, there are currently currently 4 programs and soon to be 5 that the hospital district participates in that the IGTs are used for. As I said, all those funds benefit the hospitals and, in one case, the health department. The 4 programs we participate in now are the Uncompensated Care Fund. The called the DSRIP program is to improve efficiency in programs in the hospitals. The Disproportionate Share Hospital program, and a program that benefits primarily Spawn because it's the only public hospital in the community. And the last program that will be coming online in March that we factored into our IGT calculations is a hospital rate increase program that will be coming online in March that's sponsored by the state. And the way that rate increase program works is we transfer the IGTs to the state matches them with federal funds, and in that case, those funds go to the managed care organizations that run the Medicaid program in Texas, and then they have enhanced payments that they pay to the hospitals if they achieve certain goals. And so this is now the 5th program that we're using to draw federal funds into the community to benefit the hospital providers. Are there any questions? I know that's kind of a high level, and there's a lot of money moving around in there, but that's how it works. Okay.
So you said, what's the 5th program?
It's a hospital rate increase program. It'll be operated under the Medicaid program. Okay. Correct. That's correct, Judge. Okay, so the IGTs represent a bulk of our budget. They represent I'm back on page 1. The IGTs represent 92% of our budget. County health care services that we took on several years ago represent about 4.4%. And the remaining 4% of our expenses are the hospital district's expenses. Okay. In our budget, we're going to be transferring $6.4 million to our indigent care fund. We continue to build that balance up over the years here. And the budget also provides, as a result of our relationship with Spawn, provides care for the indigents that we're required by statute to take care of. So, Commissioners, in a very, very high level, that's our budget. I can go into some additional detail if you'd like. One thing that's probably worthy of discussion is if you'll turn to page 7 of the budget book. Commissioners, this page represents a consolidation of all the district's funds. The district has three funds: it's the general fund, tobacco fund, and the indigent care fund. As you'll note from the indigent care fund, our beginning balance is going to be about almost $42 million, 41.9, and that's on row 28 under the indigent care column. And then by the end of next year, we expect to grow that balance by about 40, up to about 48.3. I'm not going to factor the general fund into this discussion so much because that's our in and out fund, and our indigent care fund is used. We're building up the balance to have the hospital district prepared for when the event comes that we have to revert back to our old agreements with SPON. That could come at any time, and we want to make sure that the district is financially situated to deal with that in the event that it happens. And so we focus on the indigent care fund balance. So today, if this event happened with SPON where we had to revert back to our agreements, and we did it at the beginning of October 1st, the district's obligations would be running around $40 million a year at that point. There'd be about $29.5 for indigent care, be about $5.5 million for county health care, and then the district's expenses for doing eligibility and the other things we do would be about $4.7 million. So in round figures, those annual numbers come to about $40 million. Today's current tax revenue generates about $33 million, so there would be a deficit. So we have a fund balance to guard against that situation where we have to come back and face that situation, and our tax rate or our tax revenues at that point are not adequate, if you will, to carry us through that situation. It's also there, although we didn't think we'd ever come to this, a situation that we may be dealing with, as the judge mentioned earlier, where we have a situation where our tax revenues are not exactly what we planned on them being, and we also use this as a guard against having a situation where we don't have enough funds. If the district got back into a situation where it had to provide indigent care under the old arrangement with SPON, we would certainly need to be talking to the court about the tax rate over a couple of 3-year period at that point, because it would have to go back up to accommodate the demands that we've accumulated over the years. So anyway, Commissioners, that's all I have.
What's the term of the agreement with Chris's?
Judges, it goes out another 20 years from now, but the current phase or the current arrangements we're in could be done away with in 90 days' notice.
90 days' notice. Mm-hmm. Either party.
Either party, that's correct.
Thank you.
And what would trigger that, Judge, most likely is a situation where the supplemental payment programs go away. We don't anticipate that happening, but and I don't mean to be negative, but Texas was not one of the states that expanded Medicaid. And I said this last year was if Texas had done so, about 90% of our indigents would have a Medicaid card right now, and we would have a very small indigent care program. Now, if it comes down to a situation where down the road the state's already gone into an expanded Medicaid and many of our indigents are covered in that program, then our demands will go down, because our biggest demand going forward is going to be our indigent care obligation.
So you're saying it was not good for you that they didn't expand the Medicaid?
I'm politically correct here, Judge, Commissioner. I'm not weighing whether it's good or bad. I'm just telling you that because the state did not expand Medicaid, if they had expanded Medicaid, 9 out of every 10 of our enrollees in our program would be entitled to a Medicaid card, because their income is at that point where they would have.
So it would have cost us less? I'll ask it another way.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So it would cost us less if he had expanded Medicaid?
That's correct.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I just want to make sure I get that right. Thanks.
I'm not trying to step on any toes here, but just, okay.
Well, I aggressively advocated 2 years ago that we expand this, because we could have cut the tax rate by a bunch, by about in half.
Yes, sir.
If we had done it. Now, that doesn't tell you what happened to the federal side, but that would have been what we would have done here.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. I did. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's extrapolate down the road a little bit. The way that we are supporting the indigent health care, Memorial Hospital, all of that now has fundamentally changed in some respects. And so, talk to us just a minute about how that would look different if we, let's say, year after next, Spahn decides this is not a good deal for them, and they send us their 90-day notice letter, and we're out on our own again.
Okay.
What does that look like?
Well, Commissioner, just to kind of start broad and get to some detail, the way our program works now, originally it started out taking care of the indigent, but the care of the indigent has become sort of a secondary issue because now we use our funds because of our relationship with Spahn and our member revenue to draw down federal funds into the community for all the healthcare providers in Nueces County. And so that I think that policy-wise is a good thing. So if we ended up terminating or
Those
somehow,
funds don't necessarily, just like you said, they don't necessarily go toward providing indigent health care.
they correct. They probably in part go to that, but they don't all go to that. They probably help those hospitals keep programs and stuff alive. All of them experience some degree of uncompensated care, and this helps take the edge off of that for them. So if we get to a situation where our agreements with Spahn go away in a couple of years, then we have Spahn's obligation to demolish Memorial will still continue. Okay, and they've essentially wound down Memorial now to where it's only providing psych services. Originally, after the initial step down, it was providing psych services and they had an emergency department. But after the hurricane, they made a decision to go ahead and wind down the emergency department there. So Memorial only does a limited number of services. Whenever we get a couple years down the road now, when they get the Shoreline Addition done, they're going to be moving psych services somewhere else in the community. They have to be maintained in Corpus Christi. So we won't be operating, or we won't need to have a hospital operating at that point because it'll be basically demolished. There won't be any obligations to the district going forward to it. So at that point, our main statutory duty will be to take care of the indigent. That's what we have to do first. And so we have enough money there set aside to take care of those, or the difference between what our tax money is and the other. Now, whether the district continues these IGT programs at that point, it's probably very unlikely that we'll be able to do that anymore. So
at that, I guess what I'm getting at, and this is the 800-pound question, at some point, it may not be, I don't want to use the correct word here, it may not be the best thing for this county to be doing what we're doing now and go back to what most counties in the state of Texas do, which is provide, 4% of your general fund budget, or 8%? 8%.
Correct, Commissioner.
Fund budget goes to the state, and then they provide that through the federal drawdowns back to the communities.
No.
I think if we get to the point that the court makes a decision to go back and do only the basic health care that's required of those rural counties. Now, the counties that are urban typically have hospital districts, so you'd have to kind of
Take an election
to close down the district. So if you go back to doing just the indigent care piece of it, like they do in San Patricio or Jim Wells or whatever counties, the ability to get in those programs, those folks, they only cover up to 24% of the federal poverty level. So we're talking about the poorest of the poor people at that point. We currently today cover up to 150% of the federal poverty level. So you could go through all those steps and stuff to do that, but if you have a minimum situation where you're providing indigent care here, what's going to happen is the providers in the community are going to put tremendous pressure on you all, because if y'all aren't paying for it, that means that they're absorbing it. Care is going to get provided somewhere, and these people are still going to be here. And so the providers are going to come back to the court, and they're going to ask y'all to do something to help them. Either they're going to ask for direct payments, they're going to push the state and the court to try to get back into some kind of supplemental payment program, or something like that. Push the state to expand Medicaid, something. But they're not going to be able to bear the load of having those people cared for that are not enrolled in our program. They can't afford to do that.
Okay, so how are the other counties that don't have hospital districts doing that?
They're struggling, but virtually all the hospitals in the state participate in the supplemental payment programs. Supplemental payment programs is what takes the edge off everything, and it essentially, and I think this has sort of been the state's mechanism of handling this, is whenever they didn't expand Medicaid, they got more entrenched in these supplemental payment programs. So that it's not like the state's ignoring the providers, because they are working with them. They're just not giving a Medicaid expansion. They're working with them and having these supplemental payment programs. And the reason they do that, Commissioner, is because these supplemental payment programs are carried on the backs of the local entities. None of the dollars that come out of this come from the state. If there was Medicaid expansion, the state would be paying for about 45% of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so your recommendation is effective tax rate?
Commissioner, we have the
here's the
effective
cost.
tax rate,
And here's the cost.
and we have a situation where y'all may talk about here later. We're prepared to deal with that.
All right, Johnny, thank you. Hang around. Thank you very much. Ronnie, good morning. Good to see you this morning. Steve, do you want to begin this discussion? And then we are going to get Ronnie and Kevin involved here in just a minute. Please.
Yes, sir. I've give you a handout there, but I'll take you through it on the slides here also. First page I have here, Judge, this is, and Commissioners, this is Port A's tax sheet for the current year, for going forward for next year. And you can see by this, their market value is at $2,596,000. The net taxable value is at $2,302,000, and that makes up about 8% of Nueces County's tax base. And of that $2,600,000,000, about 1/3 or 700 million of it is in condominiums. A big part of it is of their tax base, or a third of it is condominiums. What that means to us, with the loss of the hurricane, there's been estimates of what the loss really is of property in the Port A area, and I have here a range of 35 to 70%. I think in a meeting we had last week with the judge and appraisal district and Kevin and others, we feel that it's at 50% or more loss in property values for the Port A property. Assuming there's a 50% loss in property, the impact in our tax revenue, not for the coming year, but the following year, because would be $3.5 million. So going into your budget next year, you would be having to look at making up a $3.5 million deficit from loss of property in the Port A area. And that's assuming, again, that's at 50%. It goes, if it goes towards 70%, we're talking about close to $5 million. So this looking at this caused concern that we needed to relook at where we're at and just have a discussion with the Commissioner Court so you're all aware of the impact of the Hurricane Harvey. Any questions on that?
Ronnie, do you mind coming forward and talking to the court about what you talked to us about Friday and your perspective with your appraisal people, please?
Well,
Thank you for being here, by the way.
Thank you, Judge. And I apologize for being a little late.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I was on the phone with Mayor Bouillon, Port Aransas this morning, and they're still on the bubble. They haven't decided what it is that they need to do, and bless their hearts. But they have a meeting coming up on Thursday, and part of the conversation will be to decide whether they choose to want to do a reappraisal or leave things the way they are for this year. And if the 21st comes sooner, they'll make a decision based on that. They also know that other entities, such as the county, is waiting to see what they're going to do before anybody else does anything else. We did have conversations with the school district as well, and they were, about a week or so ago, they were in the mindset of leaving things the way that they were for this year, that we would take care of that for next year. A lot of the things that we're looking at, too, has to do with financial repercussions for the entities that are involved in the damage that's been created by Harvey. The city and, of course, and the school district there are taking big hits, very big hits. They've lost a lot of revenue for the remainder of the year. But at the same time, though, if we were to reappraise, let's say we go back in there, which we are, regardless, next week, there's a formula that has been utilized or can be utilized, and that says that from January 1st to the day before the storm, you're at 100% of market value. The day of the storm to the end of December 31st, you're at a 65% number, percent-wise. Then you add on top of that what the damage is to that value. That would be if we were to just reappraise that area. And it will only be for the areas that were affected with severe damage. It wouldn't be a county-wide appraisal. It would just be for the school, for the city, and whatever portion the county has in there as well. If each entity decides to want to do this, they have their own choice to either, in writing, tell us we want to do this or we do not. And if they choose not to, then for sure for next year, these numbers are going to be pretty low compared to what they are today. And that's what Steve is trying to get across to y'all, that next year it's going to be a hard area for that particular area of the county. What we did a couple of weeks ago, after the storm hit the following week, I think we were closed on Monday. On Tuesday we came in. Wednesday we started from the rural end of Nueces County. A whole force of appraisers that we have. We came into the city of Corpus and found out that there really was not that much damage in the county as a whole. There were parts of the county that were hit pretty hard, and that's, of course, the Mustang Island had some damage there, and then, of course, Port Aransas. And that's where the bulk of the damage is. Everything else in the city has a lot of fences that were down, a lot of trees that were down. There were some minor damages that people experienced here in the city of Corpus. But for the most part, everything was pretty much okay. We were blessed. The people in Port Aransas, Aransas Pass, Rockport, and things like that, they are in serious problems. So that's all I can tell you for right now. We cannot do anything until we're asked by the city or the school or the county to go in and reappraise. But we're going in next week to Port Aransas.
Hey, Ronnie, can I ask you, how does it work in regards to, isn't there expense involved and such for reevaluating and reappraising and all that, as far as who has to, does the requesting entity have to pay for that? Or?
Yes.
Okay. And
yeah, there is a cost involved, and it's less than $10,000 for us to go in to do that area itself. Then, of course, Kevin's going to put out his tax bills probably in October, and if someone chooses to want to redo this, then, of course, that's one bill. Then they're going to have to pay for a second billing to get those taxes in. So that's another cost factor that's involved in that as well. Then, we have our own little cost. Like I said, it would probably be less than $10,000, but it would be, if it's one district, that's what it's going to be.
so the county doesn't have to request for the whole county. The county,
No.
if you could just say this particular area.
Yes. And that's the only reason we would do it for, is just the area that's been devastated by Harvey.
And so, but if Port A decides to do it, do you have to do it twice, or do you would just do it once anyway, right? Because it would be the same evaluation for the county and, okay.
Right. See, and then after that, let's say the city chooses to do this, then the county and school district has to choose whether it wants us to give you the new numbers,
Sure.
so y'all can do what you need to do, or just leave it like that and let that entity by itself do what it has to do. So each one has a responsibility to make a choice whether they want us to do this or not. And I think that was our conversation that we had with the judge last week. So the other thing too is we've been pretty much in communication with the city and the school in Port Aransas for the last 2 weeks, and not trying to push anyone to do whatever needs to get done. There's a lot of things that they have to check off before they can finally say, we need to do this, or you know what, Ronnie, let's wait till next year.
Yeah, and I mean,
Well,
bless their hearts is the right thing, because obviously they're losing, who knows how much they're losing in sales tax revenue over the next 4 to 6 months,
Yeah.
in addition to having to deal with this. So,
See,
Thank
we also reached out to Mr. Crawford and some other business people out there to actually get a walk through some of the areas, especially the condominiums that Steve was talking about, set up the appointments to where we can go physically inside, because we can see from the outside, but it's the inside that's pretty much damaged, and that's what we need to know. And then that's what I expressed to David, our city manager in Port Aransas, as well as the mayor, for us to do what we need to do.
Ronnie, take a minute for the court. If they reappraise,
Yes, sir.
that affects the taxes for the last 4 months.
Yes, sir.
Explain how that works for the taxpayer and for the taxing entities, please.
Well, just, top of the head, it's basically from the day of the storm to December 31st, we would use a formula of 65%. Then on top of that 65% is what we see for damage. So that 65 could be maybe 80%.
So you would appraise them at 65% of what you did
Yes,
prior to the storm?
Yes. Before the storm.
Then you'd have to add on to that.
Yes,
You would need to reduce it even more for the damages received.
yes.
Could not any of this, Ronnie, be driven by, and I know this is almost a political question, but I know the entities have to get together and decide what they're going to do, but could not the public come up and say, hey, I'm a property owner, I own 12 condos over in Port A, I think to be fair to me, you need to reappraise.
No, well, to you, yes. But as an entity, they have to make a decision. You individually can come in and say, we need to do this. And that's what we're working with
So
right
the
now.
individuals,
We've had phone
they can
calls.
bypass the entities and go directly to you.
Yes. Yes.
But they have to pay for it.
No, because it'll be a supplement that'll come over to the tax office as far as the value change would be concerned. And then that's going to throw a lot of other problems into the mix when you start doing this. Our suggestion would be that if we were to leave things alone for this year, whatever we saw today, for sure, that's the number that we would utilize for next year, for the whole year, not just for the 4 months. Because it's going to take a while before Port Aransas gets to be where it's at. It's not going to be 6 months. It's going to be at least a couple of years or more to do what they need to do. So, and they realize too that you guys are waiting to make a decision so that y'all can do what y'all need to do as well. And they appreciate that. But like I said, we'll be going to the meeting on the 7th at 5 o'clock at the City of Port Aransas. I think Kevin will be there as well, from what the mayor had told me. So we will try and judge to work with the people like we normally do, but I think it's going to be the extra effort to make sure that we try and get things correct as much as we can because of the problems that we have with Harvey in the city.
But we'll have impact this year, no matter what this year, because of the individuals that are coming forward, right? I mean, it may not be.
See, because if they come forward and they go before ARB, ARB has to choose whether they're going to hear or not hear. Okay? See, so that's the option that they have. The chairman and the board of the ARB has the decision to make whether they're going to hear these properties or not.
For this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you'd have to have a whole new ARB hearing for all these people that are going to come forward and do that?
Well, normally
Unless
we
you
don't.
just agree.
Yes.
Unless you agree.
Mhm.
Right. Now, there's always still that informal method that can go on, right? Okay.
Yes.
So what you're saying, Ronnie, if they don't go to the hearing, or don't have a hearing, they're going to be charged the same taxes for the next 4 months, regardless of the damages.
Yes, sir. See, because, by law, if you want to go that direction, what's there on January 1st is what you're supposed to tax on or put property value on. That's what we do, value. But if, let's say, your house burns down on January 3rd, well, the whole year you're responsible for that value. The following years, when we look at to see, we go back in the months of October through December, checking on material on ground or to see if they made any improvements to that property that burned down. And that will be the starting value for the following year. So many times, there's enough time between January 4th, December 31st to get everything back again. So that's the way it would work. But in this case, since we have the storm that has influence as to what we're going to be doing, we tend to look at things a little bit more different.
Ronnie,
Yes, sir.
when we're as we look at this, I mean, is there anything that we've learned or that we can do differently that say other counties have that have been impacted by damages by hurricanes, or is this pretty much the formula that every county would follow based on significant, several $1 billion in damages impacting
Yes.
the tax rate?
And that's the basic formula. Other counties that are bigger than us, Harris County for one, they're bringing additional people, contract help to do what needs to get done there, along working with the insurance adjusters, things like that.
And they're
Now-
going to do the same. I mean, they have lost property.
Yes.
Valuation has gone down. They're not able to pay, so they're going to follow the same formula that we're basically doing.
Yes.
Kevin, excuse me, could you come up with Ronnie a minute? Commissioners, we've got a conundrum here. One, we're running out of time. We're on the 11th of September now. Truth in Taxation calls for us, if we do this, if we decide to make any change in where we are with the current tax rate, and you help me, Laura, we may very well have to schedule some more hearings that's going to run us right up to the end of September, which puts you in a box because of getting out the tax notices, number one. Number two, if the city of Port Aransas says we're going to reappraise, it's almost incumbent upon the school district and the county and the hospital district to reappraise as well, because we would be subject to a lot of criticism by people by saying they lowered my appraisal, you guys didn't, you're screwing me again. And so if they decide not to do anything, which would be really nice, then we just proceed with our discussion today. If they decide to lower it, we're going to have to come back and formally meet, and make a decision as a court to follow their lead or not, along with the school district and everybody else. And that creates a whole new last 4-month initiative that you get involved in. So I need,
Sure.
I'm struggling here to tell myself what the hell I know, and I don't know anything. Okay.
Well, you're pretty much dead on, and
Okay.
I want to go back and I want to address one thing that John brought up first on your question. All these issues are directed under the Texas Property Tax Code. It's not something that anybody can change. If that was to get changed, it would require legislative action, because everything he does, everything I do, is directed to us by the state legislature and what they've enacted through that Texas Property Tax Code. So we're not doing anything different than the other 253 counties are doing, are required to do. It's all driven by the state constitution, state law. Going to now your area, I kind of ran some numbers just to get you some ideas of what the impact is if Port A decides to do a reappraisal, and this is assuming kind of pull the numbers out of my tail for lack of better terms, kind of based on some indications that Ronnie gave us of about assuming kind of a probably worst case scenario about $1 billion loss. You're looking at if they do reappraise, what would happen is you would continue on, assuming you continue on with the rate that you adopt. What would happen is then that you let's say you go through and you're adopting what is proposed. You'll basically get 254 days at the current amount, and then you're going to have 111 days at a reduced amount. And that total number comes up at $1 billion of about $936,631 in lost revenue to the county.
This year.
For the coming year.
Yeah, for the upcoming tax bill that I'm going to send out October 1.
Okay.
That's this calendar year.
The budget cycle that you're calling on.
Say that number again.
$936,631. About $1 million.
And that's really, I think, on the conservative method of,
And that's assuming $1 billion loss out in Port Aransas. And I've spent plenty of time out there, and that seems reasonable. You've got a ton of damage that you can't see until you get into those buildings. There's a lot of roof damage, a lot of water damage. There's a lot of, and I'm not an appraiser, but I've been in the construction industry doing loans for commercial properties. You also have a huge loss in your business personal property, which is your furniture, fixtures, equipment, assets, inventory, the whole 9 yards. And so I think that $1 billion is probably pretty close. And so that's basically what we came up with if you adopt the current rate. I don't know what flexibility we've got in that budget, but obviously if you're going to lose $1 million, there's going to have to be some cuts somewhere. One thing you need to be aware of, though, if you do adopt a different rate, there is going to be probably some significant expense with doing a separate mailing, because the others have chosen to adopt the rates as proposed. And so the expense with the extra mailing and not being on the consolidated bill, and the reason why we have to do this is because there's units out there that have discounts, and we change their discount period when we send that out, and so it pushes their discount potentially into January if we mail late. So I got to send those out on time.
What does that mean the others have chosen to maintain? You've gotten word from whom?
Yes, they've already adopted and
City,
moved forward their rates. And
Del Mar,
right,
all
yes.
them, they've all said, we're not changing.
That's correct.
Okay.
So far.
Well, so far.
So far. Now, Port Aransas may or may not, and I can't speak for them because they're going to have their final hearing on the 15th.
That's the fear.
And what I suspect is that, based on the conversation I've had, is that they will, but they still are on the fence whether they're going to do this reappraisal. But they got to figure out where they're going to make up that money, and they don't have a whole lot of options with the loss of their sales tax revenue. So everybody's in a mess right now. And then, of course, you've got the issue with the taxpayers of their houses that are destroyed out there. I don't envy anybody trying to make these decisions right now. It's certainly not going to be. It's really a lose-lose situation no matter what you do. But as far as the process goes, you're looking at about $130,000 if we have to issue another tax bill out separately for the county.
And we pay that.
And y'all would pay that. And my other concern would be if you did that is it's going to confuse taxpayers because they're going to get two bills, not one.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So we're all kind of waiting on Port A, is what this sounds like.
Well, what would happen would be is and Laura can get with you guys on some other issues that and changing this calendar could potentially involve. But so you're looking at, to make up $936,000 is going to cost you about $130,000 to do it.
Okay.
Because we're all touching those bills twice, and it's a hard cost.
I want to make sure I understand this, Kevin. For this tax year, the tax budget that we are about to adopt, correct, Judge Neal?
Yeah.
Okay. We would have $1 million loss based on approximately $1 billion losses in property values in Port A.
And that would be if they go for the reappraisals.
If they reappraise.
Now, you're going to have some that will go through that process that Ronnie talked about, so you're still going to have some loss anyway. And I don't know how many of those you're going to see. And those would come through us, regardless of whether they reappraise on the mass scale or individual scale, they're all going to come through as supplements. So the good thing is it's going to give you some padding next year, because when these things go through the effective tax rate worksheet, those supplements are treated the same way the loss was handled for Valero last year and years prior, and then your refunds and so forth. So it's counts as money that you didn't receive, so it gives you some buffer zone going up into your effective
So
tax
we
rate
would
for the
almost
following
have
year.
to set aside that money to
Yeah.
be prepared for, just like we're doing for the Valero lawsuits and the Flint Hill lawsuits and
That's correct.
whatever refinery's going to sue us next.
That's correct.
Okay, so, Laura, I don't want to put you on the spot. You probably haven't even had a chance to look at this, but the truth in taxation laws, other than us doing that, does it allow us to come back at some point after we've already adopted everything based on the truth in taxation laws to say, well, we had this catastrophic event. Is there something in the state constitution that allows us to come back in the next 4 months and say, oh, we have to adjust that?
I was looking at this on Friday, and it's not that simple. Under the law, basically, cities and counties, they're required to do the 2 public hearings, and you have to do publication notices, not under the tax code, but under the local government code, and you have to use your form, which Dale and them have done,
Right.
Steve. The whole issue is in that notice publication, the whole intent of it is to tell the public what you're considering, and you have a particular number already. So that's what they're looking at. So the question becomes, would they get proper notice under that publication if you go differently? I mean, obviously you have a situation here where you didn't know that you were going to have a hurricane. You didn't know so it makes it very difficult for counties to address that in the perspective of loss of property values.
At the
and
same
loss of-
time, we really can't put that burden on the back of the taxpayers who are depending on us to give them an answer.
Right, exactly. So technically speaking, if you follow that under county law, you can only do what the laws give you the authority to do. So obviously if it's silent, then that means you can't do it, right? Or at least the premises. Now, the way to do it based upon the fact that you didn't predict that you were going to get this loss or whatever, and you go forward, what's going to happen is someone can sue and file an injunction and go to court and let the court decide that you were right or not right in your process and manner of publication. And so that's the risk. And at that point, because of the time periods, and of course you have to adopt a budget and he has to send out property taxes, you will have to rely on the effective tax rate from the previous year. So, either which way, you still end up with the same tax rate.
Same
that you
tax
were-
rate, yeah.
Okay,
But that's your policy.
That's a good answer. No, I understand. Thank you.
I got one. You through,
Go ahead.
Commissioner? You mentioned 2 bills. I know nobody hates to get that 1 bill. She's going to get 2 bills. So why would be there 2 bills? Is that for the 130,000?
No, that extra bill is because you guys are adopting late in the process, and it pushes us back. There's a huge process we have to go through to get our tax bill ready. It takes about 2 weeks, and that's the reason why we send those letters out June 1, telling you guys we need this rate by September 15th, because we have to map the data. We have to make sure everything goes through. Then what we do is we send out, and once everybody adopts, we actually create a tax bill and get a sample of about 10,000 of them and go through and manually calculate every single one of those bills to make sure that the information being transferred over is actually resulting in a proper calculation on the sheet. Believe it or not, we've had problems with that in the past, and it's been caught. But so it's a darn good thing, because otherwise we would have been having to send supplement bills on that, and that's the reason why we go through that exercise. It's a very tedious, hands-on, manual process that we have to go through, and it takes us every bit of 2 weeks to get that done, go through the system, get the bills back from the printer, manually go through those things, and then potentially catch any errors that may or may not be there, get those corrected, and then get the proper bill out that has to go out on October 1 because of the units. And if you guys adopt late, then you won't be able to be in that process, and we'll have to send a separate bill out for Nueces County, and so the taxes for Nueces County go out as a separate bill, as a complete separate bill for the unit itself.
So in other words, if I get a bill or anybody gets a bill, say for $2,500 taxes, then y'all going to do all these things you have to do and come back maybe 3 or 4 weeks later or a month later, say, you know what, it's not 2,500, but now you owe us another 1,500.
No, that's not what would happen. The taxes would be correct, but Nueces County wouldn't be on that tax bill. So I'm sending a separate bill specifically for Nueces County tax unit.
All the rest will be on their separate.
So they're going to get a bill for, let's say somebody lives in Corpus Christi. They're going to get City Corpus Christi, Del Mar, whatever school district they're in.
And those aren't going to
hospital
change
district.
because
those
of
aren't going to
this.
change.
Right.
That'll all be there. They'll get a bill for that.
Okay.
Then they're going to get a bill for Nueces County separately because Nueces County won't be on the consolidated bill.
That's when they're going to get mad, huh?
Yeah.
And all the mortgage companies are going to get two bills.
That's correct.
And here we go.
Yeah, and so you're potentially, I don't mean to scare you guys, but make sure you know what the reality of this, because people will see two bills, they're going to think, oh, I already paid that, and chunk it. And that's going to cause your collection rates to drop. Darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Okay, well, you guys don't run off because we're still talking here. But Ronnie, if you can stay with me for a while. Now, what our discussion has been is if Port A says we're going to reappraise, then we start a whole different deal, all right? We have to come back quickly, and the court has to make a formal decision by vote if we want to reappraise, and then we get in the mix for this year, and that affects whatever that is, but let's just assume it's $1 billion or $1 million, all right? We're going to have to deal with that in the budget somewhere. That's a given. Now, let's talk about moving forward, because last Friday, when Ronnie and all of his people were here, and Kevin, we made a call to one of the principal condo managers in Port A. He has 9 or 13 condominiums that he manages. And we said, can you give us an idea of what you think the damage is? And we gave him some numbers. He said, you're low. He said, the damage in these condominiums I manage could be all the way up to 70%. Well, he manages a lot of that $700 million worth of stuff over there. And I'll give you a good example. The Dunes condominium is gutting the Dunes condominium. So whatever the values were in there before, for the next 6 months to a year, they're going to have to rebuild that. Well, whatever that whole thing was on the tax roll for is wide open. And there are people in there with values of $500,000 and all before the storm. So that's just one example of what's happening. Charlie Zahn's condominium that he lived in lost its roof. He lost everything in that particular place. So we know that we're going to have a substantial reduction in values based on what Ronnie and his people are telling us, and 50% may be conservative for Port Aransas. And so, Steve, I'm going to let you jump in here now, and let's talk about other than the reappraisal side. And guys, I'm sorry it's taking so long, but we just got to lay all this out and talk about this. And so, Steve, will you do that, please?
Yes, sir, Judge. And you're right. The reappraisal portion, that's completely separate to
Whole issue.
where we're going to here. No, as I said earlier, if this would be for our taxes for the year 18, 17, 18, or I should say 18, 19, when you adopt the budget a year from now, you would look at potentially $3.5 million to $5 million less revenue than you, because of loss of property values from 50 to 70% of that. The impact that has, obviously, as you know, with your fund balances is huge. And I'm just going to put you through a couple of these additional pages. What this is originally our original plan. The tax revenue that we were going to generate this year, additional tax revenue is $2,673,873, and that's the additional tax revenue used in the current tax rate that we calculated in doing our budget. And for the debt service, the same thing. For the debt service, using the original, using our current tax rate, we'd get about $450,000 additional revenue for our debt service. Now, moving forward, so with that, this is with our original budget. As you may recall, we took that $2.6 million, took our expenses and revenues, and what we have proposed as a budget when we last met was that we would have a budgeted ending fund balance of $9.4 million. And what that $9.4 million, when you look at projections of what we actual would end up the year is, for the current, again, what we're proposing, you would end the year with $15,642,000 of fund balance, which is only 17.6% of our targeted fund balance. Our target is to be at 25%, so you can see that's $6.5 million less than our target. So that's at a 17.6%. So already in this budget that we were proposing, before any of this happened, we knew we were tight and where we're heading to for fund balance. So this here is looking at, should the court decide to change the tax rate, and this is a rate that we would recommend, increasing it by 1 penny, and of that 1 penny, 80% or 1/1000th of a penny would go to general fund, and the other 20% to increasing our debt service fund. What it would generate for revenue would be $4.7 million as opposed to $2.6 million, so it'd be about $2,100,000 additional revenue by raising the tax rate above what our current tax rate is and above what we had published as proposed. And for the debt service, the same thing. We would, by increasing it by 2/1000ths, would bring our debt service tax revenue to, increase by $967,000 as opposed to $452,000. Assuming this scenario, basically the post-Harvey scenario, we would have that $4,702,000 of new tax revenue. Everything else in this sheet remains the same. There's no new expenditures. The only thing that's different on this sheet is the increase of $2.1 million in revenue. And that would take our ending fund balance, budgeted fund balance, to $11,400,000.
Steve, what's the red 7.1 million?
That is the decrease in the fund balance. It decreased from the starting. If you look at the very top, our beginning fund balance was $18 million. And so that'd be a $7.1 million decrease in budgeted. The top number is actual. This is budgeted here, and so
11 million would bring us back to 17.7 million.
the 11 million. The next page will show you what we're estimating. The 11 million would be our budgeted fund balance. And then over here on the calculation, we would estimate that we would, estimated actual would be $17,700,000 roughly as a budgeted fund, or as the actual fund balance for the end of this coming fiscal year. Still, it gives us, moves us from 17% up to 19.4% of target, but it's still, as you see, is below that targeted rate. And so that's kind of the basis that we looked at as far as coming back to the court and considering an increase post-Harvey because of the impact that we're going to see going forward. That has nothing to do with whether we decide to reevaluate or not this year.
And refresh my memory again, Steve, that 25%, do we base that on our general fund budget alone, or do we include the debt service?
It's just general fund, and it's general fund revenues.
General fund revenues.
Yes, 25% of general fund revenues. My last sheet here, I've kind of summarized as I've said, this is a summary sheet for you, but within the city limits of Port Aransas, we expect 50% to 70% of property value loss, $1.1 billion to $1.6 in property value loss, and somewhere between $3.5 million and $4.9 million in lost revenue for the tax levy for the county. And again, our original budget, we had a proposed tax rate of 0.307991, which generates $2.6 million, $2.7 million additional levy. Tax levy is $967,000 increase, and that's a mistake. That should be 452. And then the general fund balance under this scenario would be $15,006,000 or 17.6%. And if you increase the tax rate by a penny, given 80% to the general fund, 20% to the debt service fund, the new tax rate would be 1 penny higher, 0.317991. The general fund would receive $4.7 million in additional revenue from, as opposed to 2.6. Debt service would receive 967 as opposed to 450, and you'd end up with a fund balance of $17,700,000, which is 19%.
Dale, the 1 cent is less than 8%. Do you remember what that percentage is? If we go up a penny, is it 7 point?
Around 6.8, 6.9.
Almost 7%.
Yes.
Commissioners, let's think about that a minute. If the legislature had changed that 8% to either 6% or 4%, you can see what kind of shape that would have put this county in and every county in Texas, and we could not, thank God it didn't pass, but we couldn't get them to understand that. But this 1 cent in Nueces County on the tax rate is about a 7% increase.
That's you're saying this is 1 cent more than what was previously recommended 3 weeks ago.
Our current tax rate previously recommended, yes, is 1 penny more than what we currently have and what was being proposed.
So the other one was 0.08 cents up, I think, or it was the same tax rate,
yes.
but it was 0.08 cent above
Yes.
the effective tax rate.
Yes, that's correct.
This would then take us 1.8 cents above the effective tax rate. And then the other, I guess, option, not an easy option either, but nothing is easy now, would be to look at cutting things that equaled what something, obviously, I don't know where you find 1 cent worth of cuts by any means, but that would also be an option that could be in here, was to look at some of those things as well. I mean, again, I know it's not easy, but there's nothing easy going on right now. So, I mean, to me, if we're going to have the discussion, we ought to have the discussion of both sides, cuts and increases, and because these are tough times, and so I guess we maybe should have included some of that on the summary, or could include some of that on the summary, but I'm not being critical, I'm just throwing it out there.
And that's true, that's an option. We have roughly $1.8 million worth of, I won't say mandatory things we have to do this year, but we certainly have to do the health insurance. We have certainly had to do the increase in pay for the correctional officers, and we have to do the continuance pay. So the thing that might be adjusted would be our contribution to the retirement plan if we were to change the formula.
Do we have to do anything other than the contractual obligation we have? Have to. I mean, want to, but do we have to do the insurance? Do we have to do the other one you just mentioned? I'm sorry. I know we have to do the contractual obligation stuff, but do we have to do those other things?
Well, we do have to. I mean, we know what the bill is for health insurance.
No, I'm saying that the new bill that we didn't pass on. I'm just not trying to cause riots. I'm just saying.
And we've done the enrollment already with all the employees. So if you change the contribution rates for the employee to take on a larger portion of that, then we'd have to redo that whole thing. And there is some issues with that, with our flexible benefit plan that has to be done by the 1st of October, as I believe. So that's why we do our open enrollment, so we have it all together for them. But that would be a difficult one to change the contribution rate on employees.
I get it, but I mean, I'm just asking because this is all difficult. This all stinks, right? We got people in Port A who have no homes. Their values are going to be cut. I think 50 is conservative. I think it's going to be 70. I think that's going to be the number. I think we're looking at $5 million worth of losses in the 18-19 budget. And so before we go forward with increases that's going to get everybody, I'm just asking because I just want to know what the options are, because it may have to be, maybe it's a hybrid. I don't know. I mean, if we're all in this together, we're all in this together. I get nobody wants to get popped, but I don't want to pop Port A, any harder. But then they have already been popped, and they're looking. They may look at. I mean, this could be a bankrupt type situation. I mean, it could be that bad out there. I don't know. And so anyway, I'm just asking. So I'm not advocating, just asking.
Your mic, Commissioner.
Which tab was it in our old budget book here, or the one we've been working with, that showed the things that we're going to do this year, like buy new voting machines and
tab 8,
tab
7. I'm sorry, tab 7.
Okay, 7. Okay. So we've got
page 2 of tab 7.
Okay, so let's start with page 1, the continuous pay, law enforcement salary. Where are you, Mike? Tab 7, page 1. That page 1, those are the things we really can't do much about. And on top of that, we have the set aside for the Flint Hills lawsuit. If you go to page 2, those potentially are the things that we may or may not be able to do something about. Okay?
And you're right. And then there's the bond money that we've.
Yep.
What I forgot about that.
You go to the recommended CO projects on page 3, that's the other thing.
That's correct.
So encompassed in those 2 pages, or if you're going to make any cuts, that's where they are.
Is that kind of a right? That sounds right, right?
Right.
Steve? Yeah.
Right.
I think we have to have a real hard discussion, and we need to probably have the county clerk in here, to have that discussion on voting machines, because that's the vast majority of that bond. Can we wait a year, and how much effect does not issuing those bonds have on us? I mean, that's got to be in this discussion, right?
They already ordered the equipment.
Yeah, that one's gone, that one is out the door.
Yeah, because it has to be here in 2 weeks. I think what I hear all of us saying is that the real options of any reduction, potential reduction in the budget, and what we're trying to say together here is, one, there's a great unknown about what happens to any reappraisal this year in Port Aransas. But if it does affect us this year, that's basically, you help me here, Steve and Dale, that's basically going to come out of the fund balance.
That's correct.
So if we lose $900,000 in revenue in 2017, that fund balance that's shown on one of your examples here
Go from 15 to
goes from 15 to 14. And that's just a starting point.
Right.
Got it. So that changes that percentage even more dynamically.
And that's what
And so if you were to lose $1 million in revenue, what I hear you saying, Brent, is we need to have a discussion about reducing $1 million worth of expenses in the budget.
or whatever we could find. I mean,
Right. But that's the discussion I hear you.
Yes, sir.
So if we are to assume, and I hate to assume anything other than it's 10:30, that we leave the challenge page alone, then we come over to the 2.282 page, and in that 2.282 page, there's $750,000. Are we any closer to understanding what that might be with the city?
They're installing new meters, so we had a discussion with the gas department not too long ago. We don't expect it to be that high, so that can definitely be something we can take out.
It could be half.
Half?
because I think what I'm hearing is if we go back and change our rate after having the hearings we've had, then that could be a problem.
After having what?
If we try to
You just need to do the hearings. and
Have
you
more
need to do
hearings
it under,
again.
With regards to open meetings, so.
Well,
you
the
would have to
budget,
set it up.
remember, there's two things. There's the tax hearings. Yeah, if we're going to change tax, we have to do that over.
Right.
The budget hearing is done the day we adopt the budget. So whatever that is, that's when it'd be. So any changes you make to the budget itself, we don't have to do any repostings at this point in time.
And then I'm just trying to keep it on my mind. If we decide to reevaluate based on Port A, if they do it, then we have to find this extra million, either in a tax increase or in a cut or in a hybrid of the two.
We just would come in with less tax revenue.
So going back now, sorry, Lloyd, I'm just trying to make sure I got this right. So going back to where you were going, looking at this page, to be better safe than sorry, we probably need to assume that's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then we have some cushion for next year, and we have some potential money that we can add back to the fund balance with those savings, right? If we said, we don't know today what's going to happen with Port A, but we're going to try to save this million in either a hybrid, but let's say, and we were able to somehow magically, mysteriously cut the million here, and if we didn't raise the tax rate any more than what we're proposing to raise, and then Port A didn't reevaluate, then we would have that $1 million cushion that we would then be able to start rebuilding our fund balance with.
Well,
Am I losing something there?
I think
Yeah.
if that happened, we'd be right where we're at right now. Well, that's right. Whatever you cut out of the budget would go towards fund balance.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Here's
Okay.
the roll of the dice you've got. And Ronnie, you help me with this if I'm wrong. We don't know what our effective tax rate's going to be a year from now. It's going to be based on whatever the new valuations are. Okay. And so the gamble you have is, are you going to have enough spread under the effective tax rate to cover the losses you're going to have to make up in property valuations? And so you almost, this is hypothetical, you almost have to cover your proverbial, this year, because you won't come up with enough spread underneath the effective tax rate next year.
Well, like you're saying, Commissioner, and I was talking with Steve and the judge about this as well, depending on the loss of value, our effective rate can be higher than our proposed rate.
Correct.
And then you'll definitely have an increase
Next year.
next year.
Next year.
Is that a bad thing? If our effective rate.
No, but they would definitely show you it would have to be an increase in tax. Even though you're doing the effective rate, it'd be higher tax because the effective rate's higher than your current proposed rate. And then if you need to go higher than that, it'd be drastically above that as well.
Let me kind of clear the water a little bit on that. Your effective tax rate is based off of your levy. So it's going to be based off it's really based off the levy, not so much the budget. I mean, it's based off the levy, which is your budget. So if your valuations go down, your effective tax rate essentially goes up. It's an inverse relationship.
Correct.
And so you're still technically, and that's just your effective rate, okay? So you don't have to budget in the loss because you're already going to have that cushion as that comes down next year. Does that make sense?
It does, and what I'm hearing is that's not a bad thing then.
Yeah, because if the values come in lower next year, and they will, unless we just make it up somewhere else. But as the values come down lower, your effective tax rate goes up because you're bringing in less revenue, and your rate adoption is based off of your levy.
Right, so if you end up doing that, and if you end up having to then adopt the effective tax rate next time, you're not raising taxes under the Truth in Taxation Law, but
That's
you're
correct.
going to get more money
That's
based on
correct.
the fact that your levies decreased.
Because you have to increase the rate to offset the loss.
Right, so
And the Truth in Taxation is based on to let the public know, are you spending more money this year or less money than last year?
Right.
It really has nothing to do with your rate. I mean, the rate's the rate, but it's a comparison of your budget from one fiscal year to the next, not the rate, because you could have the values shoot up to the roof, and you could actually have an effective tax rate that's lower. You can say, oh, yeah, we cut your rate. No, you didn't. You actually saw an increase because the values went up so much. And the inverse is the case when the values drop.
So what would you do if you were sitting up here? Just curious.
I'm not.
You guys are experts. I'm just asking. I'm going to ask a lot of people. I'm just going to ask you. I mean, I'm going to ask Ronnie to come up and tell me the same thing.
Well, exactly. But what I would stick. You're not going to have to increase your rate to create a cushion for next year because the valuation is going to drop and it's going to automatically be figured into your effective tax rate next year.
So your answer is what?
But
you've got a loss you got to deal with this year.
that's right.
Maybe. We don't know that.
Yeah, it probably will.
Some. It's either going to be some or a lot, depending on if it's the individuals or the entity, right?
And then the other thing you need to remember in next year's effective tax rate hearing is that let's say if you adopt what you've got right now, okay, you just stick with the adoption rate, and you take a loss. That loss is going to be treated as income that you didn't receive, and that's also going to figure into your effective tax rate next year. And it's going to give you more upward cushion.
So your answer is, what would you do? To my question, what would you do if you're sitting here? What would you do?
I would adopt the rate that you've got currently, if you can figure out a way to cut that potential $1 million loss. Hopefully if you don't have it in reserves, then you need to adopt something higher. And I just don't know. I haven't obviously been working that into the budget, so I don't know what wiggle room or lack thereof that you've got, and that's where your decision has to come from.
Okay, so following
You're
with my...
still gambling.
You are gambling.
That your effective tax rate is going to go up to cover you on that.
Well, yeah, it's
I need to clarify a little bit of something what Kevin was saying. Yes, the effective tax rate works on your levy, but it works on adjusted levy. So,
That's right.
well, whatever levy we have now, when we start doing our calculations in July, is when the appraisal district gives the new rates, the new levies for what we have. So there's going to be some changes a little bit in the levy we're talking about now to the levy we're talking about then.
That's correct.
So there could be some.
So as you have a decrease in actual levy versus
Based on how much money you raised last year based on current year valuations.
but it treats that loss as loss of income,
You
and
get-
so that
If your valuations go down, you get help on your effective
that's
tax
correct.
rate.
But also you get tagged on the additional loss that you would have gotten that you did not receive if those reappraisals happen.
Right, because they're considered a refund.
It's considered as a refund.
But won't necessarily be in the next one, be the following one because
Right.
Yeah, because it's income that you didn't receive that you should have, and so that actually gives you additional buffer in your TNT for next year.
Yeah, but that's not the issue.
But you've got to be able to operate this
The issue is
year.
fund balance.
Yeah, and this year you've got to be able to operate, and you've
Yeah,
got your
the
bonding
issue
companies.
is our fund balance.
Fund
So you've got to look at all that. And
Maybe
those,
hurting.
Yeah, and the reason why we're even talking about a 1 cent increase this year has nothing to do with the budget.
Nothing.
It's to look at building the fund balance for the unknown.
Right.
And the unknown is great.
Yeah.
Right, and so what he's saying
Yeah.
is he would cut the anticipated loss, and it's just his recommendation. I mean, it can be, he's saying you make the cuts, keep the rate what we've said it is, and that's the wash, because that doesn't affect your fund balance. There's
well, it does. You've
It
got $1
does.
million less coming in.
No, not if you make the cuts.
Well, if you make the cuts, yeah.
That's what you just said. I wrote down. You said cut, make the cuts, and keep the tax rate.
Mhm.
If you can.
If you can.
Right? And that would, okay.
Which, yeah, because I haven't seen those numbers
No, I know. I'm
inside
just saying,
now.
so you're saying if we can find the $1 million in cuts and keep the tax rate the same, then that's the wash, and that's what you would do based on the levy and the new effective tax rate. I don't want to put words in your mouth. If that's not right, tell me.
If you could. If you
I
can
don't know
find
that
a
we
place.
can. I'm just saying that's what he's saying. That's the wash of the budget is how he's, okay, all right.
And then that's treated as a loss next year in your TNT calculations. So you've got that cushion in there for next year.
And Ronnie, do you disagree with that? Your recommendation would be the same as Kevin's. If it's possible to make the cuts and keep the tax rate the same, that's would be your recommendation based on what he's now doing?
Well, my recommendation is just that your budget's already pretty thin. It's as thin as it can be. It's always been for the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So you can't make any more cuts.
No.
I wouldn't be making the cuts. I would continue to do what I think is best for the county, and that's to take the fact that we had Harvey to deal with. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this problem.
So you're saying your recommendation is to increase the tax rate?
Exactly.
Just asking.
Keep it under your rollback rate and hope for the best.
Two
for the
different
next-
views.
Because next year,
Makes it fun.
Yeah, because next year you're going to incur this loss for sure, and it's going to be a harder pill to
18,
swallow.
19?
Yes, sir.
18, 19?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just because our fiscal years and calendar years are different. So when we say it, I want to try to keep it clear for everybody out listening.
Yeah, what you're proposing, I think, Brent, is a way to stay at the 30-cent rate. If reappraisal happens in Port A, we had to find $900,000 worth of expense reductions in this year's proposed budget, but it has nothing to do with our problem. Our problem is our fund balance is too low. And anticipation of what might happen to the fund balance next year is why the 1 cent is being brought to the court. We can talk all day about finding $300,000 or $400,000 or something in this year's budget and hope that we can do that, but that doesn't help the problem. The problem is we're short already in our fund balance, and any hiccup in the fund balance this year makes us shorter. And what Steve and I are saying to the court is that we need to increase the fund balance to anticipate what might happen to us with the valuation in Port A, because if we increase the fund balance in the general fund by $2 million, and if the loss in Port A is 50%, we're still $1.5 million short in our fund balance of coming up to being even. And so a penny gets us a little bit of help and any other offset that we get, but we're still going to be in the hole a lot. And if it's closer to 70%, we're really in a hole because we are still under the 8-cent rollback rate, 8% rollback rate. We can't get there from here. There's no way under the current law that we can get here without a rollback election if we decide to raise it, if the court next year were to decide to go more than another penny. And that's why we're trying to anticipate a small step this year, gets us right under the rollback rate, and then whatever deal with the reappraisal in January of 18 that Ronnie is saying he thinks it's going to be somewhere 50% or greater. Right?
Well, you know, Judge,
and that really makes next year's budget tough.
you know,
Excuse me, Joe.
it's okay. I'm sitting here and kind of, I come up with about $900,000 deducted from the budget already. Then, of course, a lot of people won't like it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I got 900,000 we can reduce. But I understand what you're saying. We still have to pick up our fund balance.
Fund balance.
But, Steve, are we sure is that fund balance going to be a locked-in fund balance, or are we going to be able to draw from that?
Oh, it's not locked in.
Well, I know we take some out sometimes when we need it.
You know, the fund balance over the we've been pretty close to making the projections. Over the last couple of years, we've actually been off. The fund balances end up being less than what we projected, and that's because we had extra insurance payments to make during the years, and this year we were off because of the additional electricity we have. But on a normal year, the manner in which we project our fund balance, any fund balance, is pretty accurate. You know, when I say accurate, $300,000, if you can get, you know, that's pretty good there. So, yeah, I would not expect, you know, the fund balance in the coming year to be appreciably higher than what we're projecting right now if we just leave everything alone.
Or to be a lot less because we're going to withdraw from it.
And it'd be less, you know, the fund balance could be less if there's a reappraisal automatically we know we're going to lose about $1 million on that fund balance.
And Lloyd, all I was trying to say was, I'm sorry, were you done? All I was trying to say was, I just think we ought to look at both sides. And I'm not saying instead of, I'm saying, you know, for me to look the taxpayer in the eye and say, hey, we had to do this, I want to also be able to say, but we looked at every dadgum expense again and again and again. And I know we do that. I mean, I know this is a very conservative court already, but then there's the emergency time mode that kicks in, and there just may be things that we look at there. So I'm not saying that we necessarily either or instead of. You may need to do both. And the other thing, I don't know if we can talk about it today or we're supposed to talk about it, was that proposal that I forwarded to you, Lloyd, and I don't know when we can have that discussion because that might be a new revenue source that Constable Clark had put forward.
About the fee increase?
Yes, sir, because
I think the Sheriff's Department's here to talk about that, but anyway, yeah.
Because, I mean, and I don't know if he's right. I mean, he did his research, and, you know, he's indicating that we haven't, that some of the fees we're charging don't even cover the gas to go do it, you know, so I'm just trying to look at every single solitary thing we can, knowing that we've got a pretty dismal thing in front of us, whether it's for 17-18 or 18-19 or both. And so that's all I'm saying is I just would like to make sure we're looking at both sides of the ledger.
Well, since we can't vote today.
No,
I know, and I appreciate what you're saying. So
But I do want to say one
Yeah,
thing.
please.
Based on Commissioner Chesney's comments, and I want to highlight something he just said. This court, over the last 8 years, has worked really hard to make sure we're finding every cost-cutting effort. We've made every effort we can to thin this budget down about as thin as we can. In fact, the first 2 years I was here, Your Honor, correct me if I'm wrong, we cut like somewhere between $8 and $11 million of real spending out of the budget here in Nueces County. So, I mean, we have worked really hard. I mean, this is not a budget full of fluff at all. So I want taxpayers to understand we are really working hard to make sure that we're spending their money wisely.
You're right. Let's talk about the fees right quick. Sheriff's here. Chief's been sitting here all morning long trying to stay awake, and he's done a good job staying awake, Chief. We appreciate that. What we did, we took the proposed rate increases that Mr. Clark had, and I asked Tyner to do some work for us, and he's been working very hard to get that done. Okay. Okay.
This is the current on the comparison, right?
Here's the current, this county. This is the current. Yeah, that's a comparison between counties. Here's the current fees.
I have that.
So good?
Pardon?
Is it good?
Yeah, that has all the counties on it. Here's current.
So what I think, Tyner, I'm not speaking for you, but I think what you did is you made some comparisons with Clayburgh, Live Oak, Refugio, San Patricio, Brazoria, and Cameron County. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Actually, Captain Garcia did it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Chief, you want to talk about the sheriff's perspective on this, please?
Well, I believe it's his position that we leave the fees exactly where they're at based upon the research that was put together, that Brazoria and Cameron counties, which are comparable to Nueces County, are almost in line with what we're proposing.
Right.
So I don't know what the potential revenue an increase would provide, but some of the fees that were proposed by Constable, we've never even heard of, and we did some research in our office, and we've never seen some of these writs come over or some of these services come over. We're not too sure if they're coming over directly to our office or they're going directly to the constable's office. So I think we all understand that, we'd like to see some increases, but based upon on average size counties comparable to Nueces County, that a rate increase would not be recommended, and that was the sheriff's recommendation also.
Okay, well, thank you for that research, and thank you for doing all this. This was a lot of work, and we appreciate that. We run into the surrounding counties' differences on a number of occasions with pay and other things that they can do, but thanks. So that's a recommendation of the Sheriff's Office.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thanks for being here.
And Judge, if I may,
please.
It's that time of year that we need to put this on the agenda. If it's the general consensus of the court, we'll do it on the September 20th Commissioners Court agenda, and we got to report that to the comptroller.
I think we need to have the discussion, because if you look at the current fees, we're lower than on some of these counties on some of these things. I'm not saying we have to do everything that he's proposed, but I think we ought to at least have the discussion. And let the constable come forward, and any other constable who wants to, and say, let's talk about this as far as, some of these fees and what it's costing to
I'd like
do.
to hear a little bit more about it as well. And are these fees that are just assessed by constables, or is it sheriffs, constables, district clerk?
It's the county fee structure.
Yeah,
that
sheriff and
we
constable
authorize.
fees. It's in the local government code. By the way, I did notify by email the constables on Friday, In addition, I called Constable Clark's office, and he was out, and unfortunately he couldn't get here today because he was out of town until 1 p.m. today. But I did invite him here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I'd asked Hannah to put it on for the September 20th meeting as a discussion. I don't know if we put it on right, but I was going to get with Laura to get the wording, or whoever I need to get the wording, just to have a discussion on it, because, I mean, according to Constable Clark, I mean, he's done a little bit of research on it too, so I'd like to hear from him and find out why he thinks we're not charging enough. And
Where does the money go?
We're charging more.
yeah, some more, some less, right?
General fund, I believe.
So if we want to see what an increase would be, where would we go in the budget to see what we're getting for fees?
Well, in this particular situation, you really have to be able to dig into how many
Individual things.
Events happen during the year. Over at the end of the year, if you raise tax, then you can't even tell if it, because the collection rates play such a big role in it.
Right.
Also when you look in the budget, right, Dale? So,
Well, these fees we're talking about are all under charges for services under the budget. You'll see on the revenue side, you'll see the constable and sheriffs at the very bottom of that, where it says fees of office, and that's where all the fees that they charge would go.
Yeah, but these aren't collection issues. These are upfront payable stuff, I think. Most of these
Most
things.
of them are, yes. If
Yeah.
it's certain papers, it has to be up front, yes.
Yeah, it's up front. I mean, when someone sends me something that says we're not doing it enough, and it could generate the amount of money that Constable Clark says it could, I got to look at it. I'm not saying we need to do it, but I think we ought to look at it, especially, again, his assessment is we're not charging enough to cover cost on some of these things. Gas, you've got to go out 2 or 3 times for some of these. This is what he says, and like I said, I'm sorry, he did say he couldn't be here today. I appreciate you reminding us. And so, I mean, yeah, I think we ought to at least put it on and have a discussion about it.
No, I agree. If we haven't increased any of these since 2009, we sure need, because I can guarantee you one thing, the cost of running the sheriff's and the constable's departments has gone up since 2009.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, maybe it's not all of them. Maybe it's a hybrid. Maybe it's not an across-the-board thing. Maybe we look at it one. I don't know.
I think it's worth discussing.
I think so too.
Okay,
But
we'll put it on the agenda and talk about it. Now, what does that do to the budget discussion? Nothing?
it shouldn't have.
Yeah.
It would, if it increased, it would give us more fund balance.
Okay.
50,000.
Okay, because it doesn't go to the individual constables or the sheriff's department.
No, sir.
It just is an offset to cost, total cost, and it'd be a revenue source if we got anything. Okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate your help. Thanks for coming over. Kevin, thank you. Ronnie, thank you. Tyner, thank you. Everybody, thank you. All right. So, on Wednesday, we may not have any indication from the city of Port Aransas on what they're going to do on reappraisal, because they don't meet till the 21st. Is that my understanding? Is that what he said? Okay. So on the agenda for Wednesday.
But let me ask you a question, Your Honor.
Yeah, please.
Even if the governmental entities, and maybe this is not true, if the governmental entities decide that they're not going to ask for a reappraisal, doesn't mean that the individual property owners won't.
Oh, absolutely.
So the net effect could be almost the same. If you had 60 or 70% of the people over there who have had damage, I mean, if I were a property owner there and the roof of my house is gone, I'm certainly not going to figure I need to pay the same taxes as what I was appraised at.
I agree with you.
So you could still have a significant impact on what the appraisal.
We could have. I don't think we'll have
It wouldn't be as
$1
large.
billion.
It might not be $1 million.
I don't think that'll be that large. First place, a lot of these are out-of-town ownership, and they don't get it. But there are 2,700 condominial. I think I need to be committed, but the condominium, whatever that number is, yeah, that thing. There are 2,700 of those units, about $700 million. If they ask for reappraisal on half those, it's not going to drop that 300 million to 100 million. It's going to drop it some, and all of us would be praising that. I think what your point is, Mike, that whatever the city does, regardless of what they do, we need to anticipate there will be some loss of revenue in the current tax year. And how do we deal with that?
Yes.
It either here he comes back, you heard me. It either directly affects the fund balance, or as Brent said, on Wednesday, we have to start looking at how to maybe reduce what our costs are in the budget by X. So yes, sir. I know you came back for a reason.
I did. I had a thought as I was walking back to the office. If we know once you guys propose a rate that you're not going to change it, if I've got that number before September 15th, I can go ahead and run with the bill. But you guys still need to follow your notices. But I think you guys would if on the current calendar is correct, we start over and we verbally know what that rate's going to be that you guys are going to adopt. You don't change it within that time. We can go ahead and put that in there so we don't have to jack with the double billing. Because I really don't want to do the double billing because I know it's going to confuse the taxpayers. It's not because it's.
I got that part. I really do.
I really don't want to do it for good reasons for everybody. If I can at least know what that rate is.
Our meeting is the 13th, right? Now.
So would that be your first hearing?
No. Along that line, what we have to do is, if I understand correctly, on the 13th, the court would make a decision that they're going to propose a different tax rate.
If we do.
If you make that decision, then we'd have to get a notice to the Caller Times, be in the paper. 7 days after that, we have our first hearing. Next day, we have another hearing, and then we adopt the budget the third day. And
that throws us way past the 15th.
It does, but as long as I know what that rate is going to be, I'll just plug that into our calculations and start running with it. I don't normally do that because we want an adopted rate, but if you guys know it to avoid a double billing, as soon as I know what that rate's going to be, I can go ahead and start running with the bills and starting our testing so we know.
Well, on the 13th, we have to adopt a budget, right? No.
Well, you don't have to.
No, but
we would have to. If
we change the tax rate, we won't be adopting the budget, right?
We won't be adopting the budget or the tax rate. So if we're going to change it, then what your decision?
You start the clock again on 7 days and two meetings and everything else. But if the court indicates what I hear you saying, if the court indicates we're willing to go to a 1 cent increase, then you're telling me you can go ahead and start planning for a 1 cent increase, even though we haven't officially had the hearing and all that other stuff?
I'd be willing to do it.
But puts us all with our neck stuck over the edge of the table, doesn't it?
It does, but it'd save you $130,000.
Well, the good news is...
If we don't approve
it. Then the bills are going to go out wrong. And so I would need to know really by the 15th what I would need to know is essentially what the intention of what is going to be proposed, because you're going to have to post it. You're going to have to go out and put it in your proposed rates again. So if we know that proposal is what you're going to we get some kind of indication that y'all are going to go with what's proposed, and we can do that. I mean, I know it's a risk.
So say everything is finalized by the 20th, right? Is it the right timeline?
Say again.
Is it 20th? Say we do all of this, the 20th would be the finalized?
No, the earliest we could finalize it would be the 27th or 28th.
Oh, okay.
Because it takes about 3 days to get the Caller Times.
Yeah, there's timelines because you have to go through.
We'll be lucky to get in the paper for the weekend. And then we have to wait another 7 days. So the earliest we could have our first hearing would be like the 26th of
All right, Laura, we okay with that?
You know, the tax assessor is basically ministerial, so he's given a direction and an order by the court. The tax rate will have to be in the form of an order, and so he would not have that. So the possibility of somebody challenging that, that could happen, and he would have to resend them again with the corrected.
Yeah, well, it's a risk.
That's a
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But if the risk seems mitigated, then
But Kevin,
And I'm willing to
you're not
take it.
sending them before the first of, you're not sending them, you're just doing the calculations, right?
we send them out on. They're going to hit the mail that Friday.
On Friday what?
What? Don't make me lie. Hang on.
29th?
The end of September?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 29th. They're going to. We're going to send the.
That would be after the court approves the order.
It would be. Now, if y'all don't adopt what you proposed, then everybody's is going to go out late, and then it's going to screw up the taxing units that have
You need a
to.
decision but from us on Wednesday, period.
Not this Wednesday.
No,
Wednesday.
no. Just if I'm looking at dates here.
Because if we, well, he's looking at dates. I'm confused. So we have a hearing, we have a meeting on the 13th, we have a meeting on the 20th. We can set whatever special meetings we need to set, right? Don't we have a Commissioners Court meeting on the 20th?
We have a Commissioners Court meeting on 20th, but because of the time frames and the post notice for the hearings.
Right.
We have to wait 7 days after it's in the paper before we can have our first tax hearing.
So we could we could do that on the 20th.
Well, you could on the 13th,
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
you could recommend a proposed or do a proposed tax increase. And then again, the caller times, the earliest we could get it in the paper once you make that decision is going to be this over the weekend. And then we need to wait a whole week before we can have the first hearing. So we're really talking about the week of the 25th through the 29th is we would have to have two hearings and then adopt the budget, which would be the 25th, 26th, and 27th potentially.
So we can't have a meeting sooner than the 20th?
Well,
I mean, call it on
But
Saturday or something?
The 20th has nothing to do with what we're trying to do.
Okay.
It's the 13th.
The 13th is the first, we already have a posted meeting for 13th.
Right.
And so because we have a tax, we're talking taxes there, we can take that, new proposals and decision to go out for posting again.
And then so we have to wait 7
Gotta
days?
wait.
We have to
7
follow
days.
what the statute says we have to do in that.
And I asked this morning if there's any exceptions in the statutes for hurricanes or something like that, and the answer is no.
And I think this is something that needs to be brought up to the state legislature.
Absolutely.
Next session.
We just had a meeting with the governor of Texas,
Yeah.
who said, I'll do whatever I can do, and I'll waive whatever I can waive to help you people do what you need to do.
But he can't
Wouldn't-
touch this. This requires legislative action.
Okay, I don't know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Can't we get,
For the future, it needs to be in here.
right, no, I agree, but I mean,
Well, I don't
if
know
he
what his.
declares some sort of, he sat there and declared, I don't know that this is, he sat there and declared a proclamation while we were in the office, or while we were in the meeting, waiving some things that he was able to waive, so could we, I mean,
That was the burn ban.
I get it. I mean, I'm just saying, couldn't we ask for a 2-week extension because of everything we're going through trying to figure it out? I'm just asking. I mean, maybe he can't, but does he have any constitutional ability to do this in an emergency situation? Maybe we can still get it done.
The judge has
Dang.
the same authority.
Yeah.
And it is tied into the emergency prior to you coming in here and getting a disaster order. I mean, it's the same thing, and you basically have to deal with buying things, you waive these stuff.
It's not
all of that.
a 2-week extension. It's what he has to do to get the tax bill out for how many entities he gets a tax bill out for,
32.
or we'll have to have a separate tax bill.
But I think what Brent's talking about is the notice requirements and the dates for the meetings.
I'm
Now,
just
there
saying,
is a section.
any of this stuff.
There is a section in the code somewhere that talks about during an emergency you can do something on 70. I'm going to have to defer this to you because there was a section somewhere that talked about a 70 within 72 hours. If you couldn't hold a meeting, you can have another one. You could repost, but I don't know what that is, and that's your
Yeah, but
department.
That has to do with actually having a meeting with regards to the emergency.
Right.
We're past the emergency.
Yeah, and the other issue you have within here is your timing, your posting requirements when you change a tax rate, you're basically having to start the process and the clock over again. And there's posting notifications, and that's what needs some legislative changes after an emergency, because we all know hurricane season hits right when this time of the year.
All right, so like you have to get these bills out by what?
October 1.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, and I'm just thinking out loud, and maybe there's nothing to it. Is there not something, because what we were dealing with in there with the governor was the aftermath of an emergency. In other words, it was, okay, we're past emergency declarations. You guys may not have the same ability to do things, but I may have some ability to make some emergency declarations after the emergency is passed because of situations like this that we're trying to make financial decisions. So I'm just asking, is there not something the governor could help us with to say, okay, Kevin Kieschnick in Nueces County and every county in Harvey has until November 1 to get their tax bills out?
Well, they do. It's not that. It has to do with the discount units and how that plays in, and it changes when their discounts expire. And so, yeah, they have until November 1. I mean, we could put the tax bills out late. The problem is it's going to push those discounts into the month of January, potentially February. And they're for the ones with the 321. And if we didn't have discount units, this wouldn't be a problem.
Well, what is that? Yeah, what difference does that make? Is what Mike said.
Well, because now you're changing delinquency dates all over the map, and it's a collection nightmare.
Well, okay, we're in a nightmare.
Well, yeah,
I get it. This is a nightmare. I'm trying to figure out how, the whole.
Hey, this is the guy that didn't expand the Medicaid. You think he's going to do this?
Well, no. If this is a different deal, man.
That was an emergency.
I'm just saying, is there a way we can request it or not?
Well, we can send the tax bills out late.
What does that do? Just the discount units?
It changes everything. It's way more complicated than.
So we don't have to go to the governor to ask. You could send them out late.
But what you could do is you could ask the governor if they could make some kind of directive, because he did with motor vehicles. He gave a directive to extend the for the people affected in the disaster counties.
You didn't have to get your.
You've got until October 16th now, and there's basically a moratorium on enforcing the your registration stickers. Imagine there's probably something he can do in this arena too, but I don't know.
Well,
I wasn't allowed to go to that meeting, so I don't know.
Well, and so what we're saying is
I wasn't either. Don't worry about it.
What we're saying is that what I'm asking is what would you tell us to request of the governor that would not make it so nightmarish that we could do and not be so backed up against the wall on this? I'm just trying to. If there's no option, there's no option. There's got to be an option.
Well, can we go back just a minute and talk about what I think is our real problem here? And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Your Honor. The real problem is, regardless of what Kevin does with the tax bills, that's an issue, of course. Right now we don't know whether Port A or any of the other governmental entities affected by Harvey are going to ask for Ronnie to reappraise their taxes. Okay. If they do, the potential cost to Nueces County for this tax year is going to be approximately $1 million. Okay. So the only way we currently have to overcome that $1 million is, only three ways we have, is we can cut our budget that we have already adopted more by $1 million. We can add a penny to the tax rate to cover that $1 million loss, or we don't do anything and we take it out of the fund balance, which is already suffering.
Yeah.
Those are our three options.
Pretty much.
Okay. Next year, we'll just have to pray that the effective tax rate comes in high enough because of the reduction in property values that we're covered for any additional losses that we have on next year's budget.
It will, as a function of the TNT calculations.
Well, that's the gamble.
Well, it
should. It's the math always. If the math works, you should.
It's a function of that 42-step process.
Yeah.
that we go through for the
I understand.
effective tax rate. And so it's not really a gamble that it won't be there, that you'll be able to recoup that loss. Okay. Now the thing is will you want to
think
adopt
it's always a gamble.
rate higher because what's going to happen is that effective tax rate is going to be higher.
It's
The effective
and
tax
by
rate,
all rights, it should be.
will go up.
It should be.
Unless your property values shoot through the roof and come up for some strange reason, which I
Don't see that.
Well, it would
know,
have
and
to be the property values in other parts of this county
Right.
increasing enough to offset the loss of the property values suffered by the Port
That's
A
correct.
and
That's
counties
correct.
affected by the storm.
But isn't that true? I mean, the effective tax rate is just to bring in the same amount of revenue. as
That's
the-
correct.
So
and it doesn't take in consideration new construction.
$14 million fund balance start.
That's
Start
correct.
next
So
year.
that still doesn't solve our fund balance problem
That
next year
doesn't-
either.
Therefore, the new
You
expense,
still have to deal with that fund balance.
that doesn't deal with the $3.5 million lost revenue for the following year.
That's right.
It just gets you the current.
And that's why I said the
It-
gamble would be is if the effective tax rate came in high enough that it offset that, but I don't think it
Well, and what you have to do is you have to adopt a higher rate to offset that you're allowed to adopt, but it's going to be a rate. But
know that.
but it's that's where the difference between the effective tax rate and you look at your levy differences. And so it's
I mean, if
it's
your effective
convoluted.
tax rate,
Don't
Kevin, comes in higher next year than your current tax rate, that still allows you to adopt a higher tax rate above that.
That is
I know
correct.
that,
that's correct.
but people don't like it when you do that.
No, they don't.
Okay.
No, they don't.
Yep.
And that's the harsh reality of this.
Mike, to what you said a while ago, the 1 cent increase doesn't help us this year. It doesn't do anything to where we are right now. It helps us next year. But if we were to adopt the 1 cent additional tax rate, it doesn't give us any more revenue for the current year's taxes.
No, I realize.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said that.
It just makes up the loss.
It doesn't this year.
Next year.
It only affects going forward.
Well, it helps the fund balance.
It helps.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
helps.
maybe. Okay, well, after this exciting 2-hour period in our life, we have, and Johnny, by the way, thanks for being here. I know you've killed 2 hours of your time this morning, but we pretty well have settled on adopting the hospital budget and the effective tax rate there, so that's good. We will have a number of agenda items Wednesday that we're going to have to make some decisions on, so you guys please be thinking about that. The biggest decision I guess we're going to have to make is we've got to figure out the budget and know what we're going to do, and that's going to require us to take a hard look at our revenue stream. We'll try to get more information on the request to increase the fees. Hopefully we'll get some feedback from the other JPs for that on Wednesday. We will have that discussion. It won't really affect our budget this much this year, but it might help us a little bit with revenue. If it does, it goes to the fund balance. What have I left out, Steve? That's about it, isn't it?
I think it is.
I guess based on what you said just a minute ago, Your Honor,
Yeah.
what was the purpose of this meeting? If we're not going to change anything, why are we here?
To discuss it.
But we can't.
Yeah, we can't vote on it, but we
I
can.
know,
Yeah, but
Make a
Wednesday
decision.
we will. I mean,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
if we're
yes.
if we're going to make a change, I guess what I thought I heard you say a while ago is, well, there's no use in us worrying about the $1 million because it's not going to help us this year anyway. So
no.
Discussing that.
That wasn't what I said.
Okay.
Okay,
What do you mean?
I don't have a clue. No, what I said was that if we're going to, there's several scenarios we have to deal with. One, we have to approve the hospital budget, which we know where we're going to be. Two, we're going to have to we're going to have to make a recommendation for the tax rate that going forward for next year. Three, if we're going to adjust for an anticipation of a reappraisal values at Port Aransas in our budget, then we're going to have to look at reducing or possibility of reducing some of these anticipated expenses by some number to help us anticipate what that might be as a reduction for an anticipation of reappraisal. Now, if they don't reappraise we still have to deal with whether or not we want to raise another penny on the tax rate for the fund balance if they don't reappraise. And if we decide to do that, then we've got to start all the hearings over again.
But if they do reappraise,
Then we've got to look at where in this year's budget, as Commissioner Chastity said, if we're going to look at some reduction in these anticipated costs that we have outlined.
raise the tax rate a penny,
No,
raise the tax rate some amount.
no. We could take it out of the fund balance, and or we could take it out of a reduction in proposed cost in the expense side of that budget proposal.
Well, wait a minute.
Only 3 options.
No,
Yeah.
that's not.
Yeah.
You just said we either have to cut, or
Okay,
if we add a penny to the tax rate,
that's next year.
amount to the tax rate,
That's next year.
that covers these
No,
expenditures.
no, that's next year.
That's not.
But no, it would,
Yes, it does.
that's the additional revenue that we get next year. So in a sense, it would cover it, Judge.
Yes.
Right, you can add the penny, and it would increase revenue. You can cut
Because we'd have,
out of it.
we would have $2.6 million or $2.1 million.
But it goes in the fund balance.
There, if.
That goes in the fund balance. Doesn't go in the budget. It goes in the fund balance.
Then you have that.
That's right.
But that prevents us from having to cut these things that you're talking about.
Well, if you use some of it for the cuts,
Yeah.
yes, and then the remainder will go to fund balance, or that's the different hybrids that are out there.
Yeah.
So if the 2.6 million is what the penny generates,
Well, what
You
you
can
said
still
a
do the
minute ago,
cuts.
Judge, I respectfully, I
Okay.
don't think that's correct.
Well, let's figure out what's right.
And the other thing is, before we adjourn here today, I think we need to have some conversation about, the only place we're looking at making cuts is on this page 2 and 3 here. That's the fluff in our budget.
Right.
Okay? There's some of that stuff in there that's not fluff. Okay, so if you flip over to the CO page 3, and you look at the costs associated, there's a $5 million worth of COs. Okay? We've already spent 3.1 million of that is already out the door. So the rest we've got left is
Well, I've got 900,000 reductions. but
88 projects. Are we going to cut
nobody
those?
don't like it.
Well, now you're looking at a different pot of money. Your CO money is part of it's going to offset what we had originally put in the general fund budget, like the cloud,
Right.
and those things. So if you take the cloud out,
It doesn't really change anything.
that's right. Well, it doesn't change anything in the general fund,
That's correct.
and doesn't change
Really,
anything.
the only general fund budget sheet we've got to look at is on page 2.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
And
Unless you can think of something else.
I'm just scanning those.
Yeah.
There's some of those you could cut, but can you cut $352,000 of jail overtime?
Well, you do. You still going to have to pay it.
Pay it.
Yeah.
Somewhere or another, you're
Still
gonna
going to come out of the fund balance.
It's got to come out of somewhere.
Okay.
The only thing in there that I saw right off the top of my head is if we could reduce that $750,000 in half, we might pick up $350,000 and maybe nickel and dime somewhere else. And all of us know this, but the only way you save money in this budget is people. And right now, we're not even talking about reduction in people. And I don't want to talk about that. So if we're doing what I hear some of you saying you'd like to do, go halfway or something else, if we pick up $350,000 or $400,000 here, then the impact of a reduction, if it comes in appraised values at Port Aransas, not $1 million, it's $500,000-600,000. That hits the general fund, and you almost got to raise your taxes a penny to.
So
pick that up.
our best bet based on that discussion is just stay like we are. It's just adopt what we've already decided to adopt.
Except you are not helping the anticipated loss next year of millions of dollars in your fund balance.
What are we going to do about that?
Well, if you raise taxes a penny, you pick up $2 million.
Okay.
Okay.
4 million, but it's two.
And we can't go more than a penny because we're right up against the 8%.
But to go.
This is a wonderful discussion. No, it is. It's a great discussion. And this is why we're meeting today and having all this discussion, because there are some tough decisions we have to make on Wednesday. And let's all think about them, and we'll get some information on the fees, and we can look at other reductions. And,
We can even do both. Raise the penny and cut.
well, we could do both.
Well, and again, I don't know, I'm anxious to hear what Constable Clark has to say, because the numbers, and I'm not going to quote him, but the numbers he tells me are pretty large. If you do the math on this stuff, he's done a little math, and he's hopefully going to come tell us about it. And whether we do all of what he's proposing or not, I mean, it's a pretty significant amount that also would go into the potential fund balance.
Good.
200,000 at least.
I don't know.
We'll see.
Okay.
All right, anybody got anything else for the good of the cause? Good of the country? We're adjourned.